Good evening. My name is Patrick Woods. I'm the president of the Board of Education for Topeka Public Schools, and it's my pleasure to welcome you all here tonight. We are here for a legislative forum. We have candidates for the legislature here. I want to first start by asking all of our guests in attendance to give them a round of applause. I'm probably not supposed to say this, but I think it speaks, volumes just to see who actually shows up to meet their constituents. I'm going to save a little bit of time for the candidates to introduce themselves so you actually hear who they are and their names. They're going to go down the line and do that in a moment. I am supposed to give one quick note for those of you who live in Senate District 19. Senator Vicki Schmidt will be here. She's a little bit late. 20. I'm sorry. I happen to know who 19 is. Yeah, one of our very own teachers. So I first want to start off before the candidates introduce themselves by introducing the members of the Board of Education who are here tonight. If you would please stand as I call your name. I see Ms. Janelle Johnson in the front. Dr. Mike Morrison. And am I missing? Ms. Nancy Kirk. I see him very back. Former legislator. I don't see anyone else here yet tonight. I think the next thing I want to do is I want to thank all of these students. I think we all really owe them a round of applause. We have students from who are government and debate students here who are actually going to participate and help moderate this discussion. So they've come up with many of the questions along with a little bit of guidance and direction. And they are going to be fully participating. Let's give them a round of applause. And the last thing I want to do before we have the candidates introduce themselves is I want to call your attention in the audience to this. It's a document that's outside, over by the cookies if you need a landmark, how to find it. This is the legislative platform for all 5 of the school districts in Shawnee County. So no matter where you live in this county, this is what all of the districts have agreed upon as the way to go for legislative issues for the 2016 and 2017 legislative session. So one of the things that I hope you'll do is I hope you and the audience, patrons, will pick this up and take a look at it. I also look forward to hearing from each of the candidates where they stand on these issues that we believe are the important issues. So with that, I am going to step back and allow which student is going to come up and run the show now? Come on up, sir. Sir, is now. Introduce yourself. Thank you very much.
Good evening. My name is Aaron Watts, and I'm a debater and forensics student at Topeka West.
My name is Jesse Reed, and I'm a debate and forensics student at Topeka High School.
I would like to thank the Topeka Public School Board, our District Citizens Advisory Council, and our NEA Topeka for inviting us to moderate this discussion. Will the candidates care to briefly introduce themselves and say who they are and which district they are running in?
Thank you. My name is Ann Ma, and I'm not running for the legislature. I'm running for the State Board of Education District 4. It's about 1/10 of the state, so it's all of Shawnee, Osage, Jefferson counties, part of Wabaunsee, part of Douglas County, and part of Potawatomi County. And I appreciate your attendance tonight.
Hi, I'm Laura Kelly, State Senator for District 18. You're sitting in it. My district is sort of central Topeka, all of northern Shawnee County going on over to Silver Lake, Rossville, and Willard, then out into Pot County, St. Mary's, most of Omega, into Wabaunsee County, Fargo, Paxico, and Maple Hill. It's good to be here tonight.
Good evening. I'm Dr. Candace Ayers, and I am the challenger in Senate District 20 running against the incumbent Senator Vicki Schmidt. Our district encompasses southwest Topeka, and then extends into Auburn and Dover, and then southeast of Bugsy. We have Eskridge, Harveyville, and out to Lake Bugsy. Thank you for having us tonight.
Anthony Hensley, I'm the state senator for the 19th Senate District, which is the eastern part of Topeka and Shawnee County, all of Osage County, the western portion of Douglas County, and a small portion of Jefferson County. I've always said it is a composite of Kansas and comes out of inner city Topeka and then takes in the small towns of Osage County. And I also want to make this announcement that Ann Maw is running for the seat that is being vacated by Carolyn Campbell, who served for 12 years on the State Board of Education and also served on the USD 501 School Board.
Good evening. My name is Virgil Weigel, and I'm running for the Kansas House in the 56th District. I'm the challenger. And the 56th District encompasses Topeka and parts of Shawnee County, 21st Street on the north, Gage Boulevard on the west, Topeka Boulevard on the east, down 45th Street, then at Dog Lakes out to Lake Shawnee, and then go south down to 61st Street, and then back over to Gage Boulevard. Thank you.
Good evening, I'm Annie Kuether. I represent the 55th District, which is in central Topeka, Washburn University. I appreciate this microphone being the height it is, but it's going to challenge somebody else who's going to come after me. I am running unopposed, so you're stuck with me for another 2 years. But I'm delighted to be here and to be able to support public education. Thanks for having me.
Hello, I'm Renee Hansen, and I'm running for state representative as a challenger in District 54. It's the southern fourth of Shawnee County, and parts of it wrap up around the eastern part of Lake Shawnee, the northern part of Osage County. It includes the cities of Burlingame, Overbrook, Scranton, Carbondale, Auburn, some unincorporated cities, Barrington, Wakarusa, and it also picks up 2 townships over in Douglas County. It also includes about 8 different schools, parts of 8 different schools, and I also know of at least one student that is a 501 student that lives in Shawnee Heights.
Good evening, I'm Adrienne Olejnik. Annie told me to take off my heels. I'm running in the 51st for the House seat against Ron Highland. He's chair of the House Education Committee currently. And I think you probably have a good map of Kansas in your head from everyone, but my district is very large geographically. I am in Shawnee County, I live in Rossville, but the district also is all of Wabaunsee County, the southern part of Pottawatomie County, including Wamego, eastern Manhattan, the little sliver of Riley County, and northern Lyon County. So it's quite extensive, and I'm glad to be here. Thanks.
Good evening. My name is Jim Gartner. I'm the incumbent in the 53rd District. I was appointed in June, and you are in my district right now. So welcome this evening. I have been, my district goes from Gage Boulevard, that's the eastern boundary, out to Urish Road, back to 21st Street, Kings Road, down to 29th, back to Gage Boulevard, encompassing I-470, everything north, up to the river. So this thing keeps falling. So that's my district. I've also know a little bit about education. I've been on the Auburn-Washburn School Board for 8.5 years, and I have 501 and 437 in my district. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Brenda Dietrich. I'm the recently retired superintendent of Auburn Washington Schools. I'm running for the 52nd House District, and I am running unopposed after defeating my opponent in the primary. My district does include parts of 501. I go all the way from Gage, from 61st Street southwest Topeka to Gage on the east, and then over to French Middle School on 29th Street, over to Hodges Road, and I go north. So really my district, the 52nd District, is a subset of the school district for the most part, with little pieces of French Middle School in the Skyline area, just a little bit west of Gage. So thank you very much for having us here this evening. I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you. The first question will be going to Anne on my right, and let's begin our discussion.
So just to clarify, for these questions for the first time through, we're just going to have the members running for the Board of Education answer, and then we'll move on to the other members. So for the first question, we'd like to ask, what are your qualifications for running for state school board? Further, what sets you apart from your opponent?
My qualifications for the state school board, I believe, are actually quite extensive. I have 2 degrees, a bachelor's and master's in education. I actually taught in public schools as a high school science teacher for 5.5 years. I was the president of the American Businesswomen's Association, and in that office, I traveled the nation teaching business skills. For the last 15 years, however, though, I've served on what used to be the North Central Association and is now Advanced Ed, accrediting both public and private schools across the state. I also served in the House of Representatives here at the Kansas House for 8 years, and half of that time I served on the education or higher education committees. While I was in the House, I championed the creation of the Tech Ed Authority because I strongly believe that high school students should have more opportunities to earn college credit and to learn technical skills and earn certificates. And I'm really proud of what we've done there with Tech Ed. I think the thing that really distinguishes me from my opponent is that she homeschooled all of her children. And she supports using tax dollars for private schools. I do not, and I think that's the biggest difference.
Thank you. Could we have the next candidate? For the board? Oh, my apologies. Okay, we'll move on to the next question then.
What do you see as the 2 biggest challenges for our public schools in Kansas? How will you address those challenges?
Well, I think the big gorilla in the room for this year is going to be adequate funding. We need adequate and equitable funding, which we haven't had for some time, and the block grants have only aggravated that issue. So that would be my number 1 goal, is to make sure that the state board is involved in that. So many times in the past, the state board and the experts at the Department of Education were totally pushed out of the process. So since I've been in the House for a while and I know the system, I plan to be quite active in that. There are several other things that might come in second, but I think one that's really big for me is teacher supply and making sure we have quality teachers. I think the state board Blue Ribbon report has a lot of great ideas in it about keeping that supply going, about encouraging young people to be teachers and how to keep teachers. So I think we need to implement that plan. I think we also need to make sure that we have a quality licensed teacher in front of every child, and that's something I plan to work on by making sure we keep strong standards for teacher licensure.
All right, for the final question, what will you do if elected to support the unique strengths and challenges of diverse urban districts like Topeka Public Schools?
I think probably the number 1 thing we could do is to make sure that whatever funding formula we get allows for the flexibility to accommodate students who have extra needs. As you know, under the old formula, we had additional money for children who live in poverty, and I think in 501 there's well over 70% of the students who are on free and reduced lunches. So we have extraordinary things to deal with here that other districts wouldn't have to deal with. So I think the best way to do that is to make sure, number 1, that we do make sure that the formula we come up with accommodates all the different range of students that we have. As you know, anybody who is familiar with 501 knows we have a whole range of students from rich to poor, from urban to suburban, and we need to make sure the formula accommodates all those needs.
All right, well, thank you to our candidate for the board that showed up. Next, we're going to turn it over to the candidate.
Hi, everyone. My name is Grace Hattersall, and I'm a member of the debate and forensics team at Topeka High School.
My name is Jillian Witzke, and I'm a debate student at Topeka West High School.
And so these questions will be asked to the members running for House. So I believe all the candidates have already introduced themselves. So in the interest of time, please limit your responses to about 2 minutes. The first question, in the context of the needs expressed by the Shawnee County Schools Joint Legislative Platform, how would you address the need for a new school funding mechanism to replace the block grant system?
Where do you want to start?
First person on the right.
So those are the
Should we?
So I got a lot of my response will echo what Ann Maud just said earlier. Any formula that we have to address some of the issues that were in the platform for the Shawnee County School Districts is really based on equity of funding and adequacy of funding. And so really it just boils down to, do we have enough dollars to be able to fund any formula, whether it's the old formula or the current or a new formula. Certainly the block grants were never meant to be a long-term solution and were very detrimental to I actually don't know any school district that didn't suffer under block grant funding, actually. So for me, it's going to be, we've got to find an adequate revenue stream to be able to fund a formula. We have to make sure that that formula is equitable and adequate, and we have to be able to work together to find avenues to recognize the different needs of our very different 286 school districts in Kansas, of which 5 are right here in Shawnee County. So we have to have some flexibility in that formula. We have to have some adaptability. But more importantly, I think we need to listen to what our constituents are telling us are most important for them, for how we fund our schools. And we need to listen, as Ann said, to our experts to make sure that we understand clearly what we're doing and what the consequences are of the formula that we are going to create, hopefully, this next session.
Thank you. Can I have the next candidate?
I fully support what the delegation came up with yesterday and presented the Shawnee County delegation as far as recommendations for school finance formula, the things that ought to be included. That's what I'll represent. I think early childhood education is very, very important. I think we need to move back to a per pupil basis as far as funding is concerned. So all those elements I agree with, and that's what I'll go into the legislative session this year and represent my district. Of course, as we all know, who knows, as Brenda has already pointed out, with the funding mechanism, how that will end up, but initially that's what I'm going to go in and represent you all. And while I'm up there, oh, there it is. I will also say, while we're dealing with the funding formula this year, it would seem to me it would give the opportunity to look at the budgeting process overall, because most of my fellow school board members realize it's complicated. And I'm sure there is a simplified version that we can come up with as far as the budgeting process is concerned as we move forward. Thanks.
I think we're all ready to get past the school funding problems that are in the headlines every day, and we have to do do that by obviously getting a new formula in place. It was distressing that block grants were put into place because it left us in turmoil. There was no plan for the future, and not much progress has been made over the past few years on that. So that's going to be a priority this next session. And what I, really applaud those of you sitting in this room is your commitment to education in general, and also early childhood education and full funding of kindergarten. I think that is the direction we need to move, so I would advocate to make sure that that's part of the new formula. The old formula was pretty good, but there are definitely some enhancements we can make to make sure that kids are getting the best start in life, because money spent there is going to be an investment not only in that individual child's future, but it's going to be cost savings for taxpayers. We hope to get better educational outcomes from those kids who have had a really good start in life. I'm a librarian, so of course, I think reading to kids is really important. And, that's not always a given in families. So if we send them to quality early childhood, that is where we should go. There's a lot more to be said, and you're probably going to hear, similar things all night about education. I think that's hopeful for you as an audience to know that we're going to go in there and we're going to work together. We're going to listen to you as parents, teachers, principals, school board members, and we'll get down to the hard work, and we want your input. Thanks.
Is that all of the candidates? Yeah.
One of the most important things that we do as a society is to educate the children that are the future of our society. And so getting that funding formula right is one of the most important things we will do as a legislature. It's mandated by statute. So we've got to get that right, and we also have to get the funding piece right, which is echoing what everyone else has said. But I heard this study that the difference between a very successful child and one who isn't is about 5,000 books read to them before kindergarten. And so I emphatically support preschool education for all children in the state of Kansas. I think it will make a difference for all of them when they get to 12th grade and are moving on into the future of their lives.
In the interest of time, since I am unopposed, I'm going to say ditto. I'm not being facetious, but this is my 22nd year in the Kansas House of Representatives, and it will be my 22nd year supporting public education. I'm supported by you all, and I will fight for everything good we can get. So in the interest of time, I'm going to move on.
I think that we need full and equitable funding. We haven't had that for the last few years, and if I'm elected, that's what we're going to try and work for up in the legislature. The block grant situation just was a poor substitute for getting dollars into the classroom, to the schools, and I think we can do better, and that's what I plan to do if I get elected. Thank you.
Okay, our next question will be, how do you feel we should address shortfalls in the state's budget? Starting with candidates left, working to the right, please. You're
You're going to have to repeat that question. I did not hear it.
Okay. So, how should we address the shortfalls in the state's budget?
Oh. I honestly thought that was going to be a Senate question, so I wasn't paying attention. I apologize. So, shortfalls in the state budget. Well, first of all, I think that there are certainly equity issues. We just talked about that earlier about school funding that we need to take a look at with our tax policy. And so I think you've heard candidates now repeatedly during the primary and during the general talk about the fact that we need to take a very long and hard look and analyze our current tax policy. And in all aspects of it, there are things that need to be changed. We know that the tax benefits to the LLCs is something that folks are very unhappy with and do not support. That is certainly going to be something that we'll want to discuss immediately. So certainly tax policy is an issue that we need to take a look at in all aspects. I think that's going to be all I'm going to say.
That's all.
That's all I'm going to say.
Well, I'm going to follow up with basically what Brenda said, I think, yes, we need to take a total look at our tax structure in the state of Kansas. I think I was quoted in the paper the other day as saying it's a disaster, and there's a lot of work to do. It's not equitable. I think we need to look at everything. LLCs, I think that will be repealed. I know my opponent believes it shouldn't be repealed. I believe it should be, and we need to look at the total tax structure and come up with a different mix. I believe totally that everybody ought to be paying their fair share, and I think if we get back to that will bring in additional revenue to the state.
So I'm going to tell you what you probably aren't going to hear from any of us tonight, and that's what I hear from my opponent, is that the economy is in a slump, oil and gas revenues are down, agriculture, aviation, anything but the income tax cuts are what you're going to hear from my opponent. And so we need to face reality, and I think you've heard that already, and you're going to hear some more, that the 2012 and subsequent tax changes have really damaged our economy here in the state because of the tax policy. Sure, other things do play an important part, but we've been able to handle those ups and downs in those cyclical industries in the past because we've had really solid tax policy of income, sales, and property tax, and we have just cut off one leg of that revenue stool, and we've got to get it back by putting LLCs and other sole proprietorships and all those who were in that exemption back on the tax rolls. We used to have 3 tax brackets for individuals. We reduced it to 2 and lowered the rates. So we've narrowed our tax base. And here's where we are today with a revenue problem. So if we want to fund our priorities like education, we've got to have comprehensive tax reform in the state.
Couldn't agree more with what the last 3 people said. I think one of the things that we really have to look at is numbers and getting those correct. I come from a background of an accounting degree, and I have an MBA from Baker, in addition to some education classes that I've taken at Washburn. And I believe that one of the things that we really need to focus on is getting our tax policy correct so we can get our balance sheet balanced.
I could not agree more with Adrienne. The 3-legged stool was something that was created back in the mid-80s, and it worked really, really well. And one of the legs has been cut off, and you know as well as I do, when you have a 3-legged stool and one leg's gone, it isn't going to work, and that's where we are. So I agree with what other people have said, and again, in the interest of time, I will let them continue.
The 2012 tax policy, before that was instituted, we didn't have the kind of problems that we have right now in the state of Kansas. We had ups and downs, we had some minor recessions and things like that, but nothing on the scale that we were seeing for the last 2.5, 3 years. And you can all be traced back to that. I believe, as is already said, that there should be a 3-legged stool, and when you eliminate one of those and you don't have some mechanism to provide another revenue stream, this is what you got. And we need to fix that, fix it now. We can't wait any longer. It has to be done now. Thank you.
Our final question for the candidates of the House will be, how would you address the dramatic increases in costs of post-secondary and higher education in the state of Kansas?
Again, I think that almost everything that you're asking us about has to do with revenue. The only reason that the cost of higher education has continued to increase is because as a state we've not been able to fund at the level we have in the past. And so to be able to have our colleges survive at the level that they want to survive at, they reach out to our parents and to our students and they raise tuition because that's the only thing that they have left, fees and tuition. So again, I think the only way that we can help lower those costs is to find a mechanism to be able to retrieve some funding for higher education. There's nothing more important than post-secondary education, whether it's at the college level or the vocational level. Kids graduating from high school today have to have additional skills to be successful. How can we support that? We talked about early childhood education and how important that is, and I agree with that 100%. We have to have a very successful K-12 program. That requires certainly accountability and funding, but as you get ready to graduate and walk across the stage and get your diploma, graduate from high school, you have to be able to afford that next step. And hopefully we'll be able to assist our higher education institutions with some additional funding in the future. But we've got to find a revenue stream. The three-legged stool that you've been hearing about, that's exactly the problem that we have right now. Our taxes aren't fair, they're not balanced. They're not providing a revenue stream that's able to support our agencies, our education systems, our general services in the state. So that needs to be fixed. Thank you.
I agree that the funding, we need a revenue source for higher ed. It seems if the funding's not there, the tuitions are going to increase, and we've seen that already, so we have to do something about that. Also with technical colleges, WTI has really grown, and they're training a lot of young folks for new careers, so we need to have adequate funding for them. I'd like to see a revenue stream that's dedicated to either higher ed, technical schools, and I question sometimes EDIF, it's the Economic Development Initiative Fund, and I know most of the people up on the stage know about it. That's where the lottery money goes. $78 million, I think, last year, the lottery made, and the first 50 of it, 50 million, goes to EDIF. And there are a number of different organizations that receives that money. I think we need to take a look at that again. Is it really doing what we thought it was going to do? And maybe we ought to dedicate that funding going forward to higher ed or education. Thanks.
Higher education funding has definitely been one of the groups that has been affected by the tax cuts. So I agree that we've got to get revenue back in place so we can restore the cuts and make sure that universities in our state can keep the tuition low. Also, I think we need to discuss how do we keep those recent college graduates in Kansas. We have an issue with Kansas looking like a good place to stay after you graduate college. So if there could be more incentive programs, especially in rural areas, western Kansas, central Kansas, even in my district, while Muncie County is very rural, a health clinic is closing, there's no dentist. So this is a northeast Kansas issue as well. So we need to make sure that we are keeping the best and the brightest, and I think that there are different ways the state has done that in the past, and we need to continue to look at programs to make sure that we are keeping those really good students here.
Well, clearly it's a revenue stream issue, as the other candidates have said, and higher education is one of the things that we strive for in the family that I grew up in, and our goal is in each generation to move a little bit further beyond that. I have a grandfather that graduated 6th grade, my parents high school, my husband and I both college, my daughter is a postgraduate. And so it's important for us to make that accessible to all citizens in Kansas and to further educate all of our citizens. And then, as she said, also try to find jobs and ways to keep those individuals in Kansas. So the money that we've spent improving our brain trust, so to speak, stays here and helps our Kansas grow.
I again agree with what has been said up here, but I think what we really need to stop and remember is that this legislative session is going to be like being on the Titanic. we're going to have a whole different makeup in both chambers. But we're going to really have to have a very severe conversation about how we're going to start turning this ship. It's not going to be easy, and it's not going to be quick. So while we all get up here and say, this is what we want, and it is what we want, we just have to, I just think we need to be reminded that it isn't going to happen quickly. But I think we're going to have two chambers that are going to look very different that will really have a more positive attitude about public education, higher education, and I'm looking forward to having that conversation.
Higher education has taken a 4% across the board cut. To me, that just doesn't seem logical. We have 6 regent universities, I think that's right, 6 regent universities in the state of Kansas. And I want to talk about them because what I think the big picture a lot of people are missing is that these universities, especially, I'm going to say KU, K-State, and Wichita State since then, are not only regent universities in higher learning, but they're also, they have the medical school, technology. You go over to KU, there's a building over there dedicated to NASA, moon exploration, and I've been over to that building several times. It's an engine, it's an economic engine. We bring in students there, we educate them, and hopefully they're going to stay here because they like the environment. But we need to fund those in order to get those people in there, get them educated, and use the technology that's available, that's coming online. And once we do that, that economic engine is going to pay for itself over time. That's what we need to do. Thank you.
Candidates, we thank you for your time. And now we will go to our Senate candidates.
Good evening. My name is Alora Wilder, and I am a Topeka West debate and forensics student. And again, I would just like to thank everyone for coming tonight. And
hi, my name is Liz Freeman. I'm also a forensics student at Topeka West High School. Before we begin, Senator, you weren't here at the beginning. Would you like a chance to introduce yourself?
Wanted to make sure I knew how big that introduction was, because you shouldn't give a politician a microphone without further parameters. So anyway, my name is Vicki Schmidt. I'm the current senator in the 20th Senate District, Southwest Topeka, and about a third of Wabunsee County. So thank you. I'm sorry I was late. I had a previous engagement, but thank you very much for showing up today and being involved.
all right, and again, in the interest of time, we'd like you to limit your responses to 2 minutes. First question, in the context of the needs expressed by the Shawnee County Schools Joint Legislative Platform, how would you address the need for a new school funding mechanism to replace the block grant system?
We'll start closest to us and we'll go in.
First of all, let me say that one of my students is on the front page of this publication, Premier Jones from Highland Park High School, who happens to be Burl News' grandson, Dr. News, the principal there, and I'm real pleased to see him included. You know, the block grant system was created by repealing the previous school finance formula, which I truly believe was a mistake. The previous school finance formula was tried and true through the years. The problem wasn't the formula, it was the underfunding of the formula. And let me give you an example of that. In 1992, when I was on the House side, which was about 40 pounds ago for me, we passed the school finance formula with a base budget per pupil of $3,600. Today, the base budget per pupil is $3,852. That shows you the historic neglect by the legislature to adequately fund the formula. If we had kept up with inflation through all those years, the base budget per pupil should be in excess today of $6,000. So that's the linchpin of the new school finance formula, is to have a base budget per pupil and then take into account as Ann Law was saying, the diverse needs of students. We have to include at-risk funding, we have to fully fund special education, and all of those things that were part of the school finance formula previously. And I've always said that should be our starting point. We should use the previous school finance formula as a starting point for a new one. Final thing I'll say about the new one is we have to take into account the diversity in property wealth between districts. Another example, the Galena School District in southeast Kansas raises $1 million and they raise $17,000. That's $24 per student. Whereas in the Burlington School District, $1 million raises $450,000, which is $550 per student. So I think it is very important that as a legislature, we don't be parochial and look at our own county, our own school districts, but we also take into account the Galenas of the world, because we can't leave them behind.
Well, as you've heard others say before me, what we have now doesn't work. I am not in favor of block grants generally, because when I was at the health department, I saw how those were abused and how they frequently were inadequate to cover any of the expenses that they were meant to cover. And I don't see anything that was wrong with the former school funding formula that we had. It took into account everything that needed to be accounted for to operate a school district, including transportation costs, the cost of living in that district, how many at-risk students were there, special ed students, even the outlays that went to the physical plant of the school. So I have heard many people say that they rejected that formula because they thought it was too complicated. I think if you ask any school administrator, they will tell you that operating a school district is a complex task. And so for me, I don't think that the formula was too complicated. I would rather say that that formula was comprehensive, and that's what's needed in this case. And so in this case, I'm going to agree with Senator Hensley that we have to look across school districts and across the states at the individual needs that are in the different counties and school districts, and we have to account for those, because if we don't, we are shortchanging everyone that lives in the districts and across the state.
I think just about everybody out here is going to agree that block grant doesn't work and that we need a new school formula, and that new school formula will look a lot like the old school formula with some tweaking to go on. I think the things I want to see specifically in the new formula, or at least the budget for education, will be enhanced funding for early childhood education, if not funding for preschool in our public school system. Definitely funding for all-day kindergarten. I think that's an imperative program. Most of our school districts are doing it now, but we're not helping them out paying for that. I'd like to see more after-school programs. We have a lot of kids with special needs that staying after school, tutoring, those kinds of things really will enhance the education for kids who need a little more than they can get during the regular school day. Third, I think the other thing that we need to reinvest in is our teachers. I was just listening to the radio on the way over here, and they were talking about the dropout rate of teachers, how often they're quitting. And I think we're up at about 8% turnover in teachers every year. There's a mission going on now to get that down to 4%. And what they said there is that the way they'll do that is, they're not leaving because they don't like the kids. They're not leaving because they don't like the parents. They may not like the parents, but that's not why they're leaving. They're not even leaving because of the low pay. They're leaving because of the working conditions where they don't feel appreciated, they don't feel well-trained, and they don't feel mentored. So I think we need to infuse into the budget the dollars that will allow us to give the things teachers need to feel needed, wanted, but also to encourage them to stay.
Well, I feel like I could be Representative Kuether right now and say ditto, because I do believe that what has been said is absolutely the truth. I did not support the block grants when they were abruptly came to us in the Senate chamber. They had not had
appropriate hearing. We'd not heard from people about it. We had no idea what we were doing, quite frankly. Well, some of us had an idea what the goal was. And the block grants just do not work. The previous funding formula, I think people think that it was just a formula that we've had all these years. It had gone through many, many changes through the years. It had accommodated changes in our society, changes in our schools as we've gone along. The problem was we never fully funded it, and that is a huge issue. I was going to tag on to what Senator Kelly said about the teacher issue. We used to have programs in place that mentored first-year teachers. I think no matter what your job is, I think it's my job as a pharmacist. I was very lucky to have good mentors for me when I first started the practice of pharmacy. You don't know that. They don't teach you everything you need to do to be a pharmacist in school. And the same way with teaching. But you need to be able to reach out to those teachers that have been there a while and can mentor you and can make suggestions so you don't get so discouraged and you have the tools that you need. We don't give our teachers the tools that they need now, and certainly the block grant system made that even harder. So I think we'll go back to basics with it, but we need to look at that old formula, what they now call the old formula, but look at that formula that we abandoned and find out ways to tweak it and to make it more relevant. It's a huge, Kansas, the geographic area of Kansas and the schools are vastly different from Johnson County schools versus school districts out in western Kansas. The population base is a lot different. Transportation becomes a huge issue. So, thank you.
Thank you. Second question, how should we address shortfalls in the state's budget?
Well, reference tonight has been made to the three-legged stool, and let me tell you where that comes from. That comes from a Republican governor. The last Republican governor we had, Bill Graves, who was a moderate Republican, commissioned a tax study, brought in economic and tax experts, and said the tax structure in Kansas is like a three-legged stool. You have property, sales, and income taxes, and those three legs should be in parity with one another. And as was referred to, now what's happened under the tax policies of our current governor is one of those legs has been cut off. And so what's going to happen to the stool? It's going to topple over. We have a governor who in a State of the State message said, look out Texas, here comes Kansas. And in Texas, you don't pay income taxes. You do pay very high property taxes, however. And Texas, has a resource that Kansas does not have. It's called oil. We're a small Midwestern state in the middle of the country, a little less than 3 billion people, and we don't have those same kind of resources that the no-income tax states have. And so consequently, what the legislature is going to have to go back to is pre-2012 tax plan that was passed. I voted against it, but it was passed in the 2012 legislature. And we've got to reform the income tax in Kansas, starting with the 330,000 business people who enjoy a tax break, paying no income taxes while wage earners continue to pay income taxes. That's where we start with this. And with a reformed tax system, hopefully then we can fill in the gaps in terms of the revenue shortfalls we've had. We will stop raiding the highway fund, which has been done, some $2 billion worth of raiding the highway fund, and we will not use capers as a credit card, as well, in essence, the legislature has done for the past several years.
Well, I do favor returning to the pre-2012 days when businesses paid their fair share of taxes. My husband owns a small business, and he's been a recipient of the tax exemption since it began. And I can tell you that he has not created one new job because of it. In fact, he knew from the very beginning that it was not going to work because the amount that he receives is not enough to create a job. And in fact, that is not what drives job creation. It's market demand that drives job creation. So we absolutely have to repeal those tax exemptions because they have put this big hole in our budget where we lurch continually from one budget crisis to the next. So even if we did do that, we're still faced with a situation where the revenue is not going to come in right away. Just as it wasn't sucked out of the economy right away, it's not going to come back into the economy right away. So we have to have a plan in place for what are we going to do in that year and a half or 2 years that we don't have that revenue, and while we're waiting for it to come in. And I discovered when I was doing some research an interesting fact that Kansas is dead last among all of the states in drawing down grant dollars that we are due to have in relation to the amount of federal tax that we pay in. And one mechanism that we could potentially use to bring revenue into the state is to pursue those grants. And those grants run from education grants to supplemental nutrition grants, environmental grants, energy assistance grants. I mean, they run the entire gamut of the social issues that are already affecting us, and we could use that money to help support those while we're waiting for the revenue to come in. So I am a very big supporter of making sure that the legislature does everything it can do to be able to draw that grant money into into Kansas. I'm thinking Texas because Senator Hensley was talking about that, and I was born and brought up in Texas, and I can promise you, you do not want that. Okay? So I think that what we do need is to pursue all our avenues of revenue while we're waiting for the tax cut repeal to take effect. And that would be how I would do it, especially looking at phasing back or cutting back sales taxes, especially on food, as revenue comes in. I think those need to be prioritized so that we can eventually lower the sales tax and look at a more balanced tax policy.
The 2012 tax cuts were enacted in 2012, actually went into effect in 2013. We knew at the time that the vote was taken and the bill was signed exactly what they would do to the state. I used to carry a chart around everywhere I went that showed them going up because we were recovering from the recession and then plummeting down. And we are $2.5 billion short of the revenue that we should have brought in the last 5 years. The result of that has been 9 very significant budget cuts, 3 credit rating downgrades. We are $4 billion in debt. We just bonded another $1 billion for Capers. The reason we did that was not to shore up Capers. The reason we did that was so we wouldn't have to put the employer contribution into Capers, and we could use it to plug the holes. We are in a terrible mess. The only way we've got is to do exactly what folks up here have been saying. We've got to reverse the 2012 tax cuts and put in a fair, sane, and balanced plan. I think my colleagues who are coming in are prepared to do that. Most of the ones who won in the primaries ran on balancing the budget and public education. So I think we're gonna see a totally different kind of legislature in 2017 that will be willing to take a look at the tax structure and public education funding and take the tough vote that they're going to have to take to reinstate that. The other thing that I hope we do in 2017 is put a real rainy day fund in place. Some of what we've gone through more in the recession than since the tax cuts, we didn't need to do that if we would have been putting away money every year to deal with what we know will be recessionary times. We're cyclical, it's going to happen. So last year we sort of did a phony budget stabilization fund that is no more than what we already have in statute. I think it's time for us to give the people the opportunity to put the rainy day fund in the Constitution and then handcuff legislators so we can't use it for our pet projects.
Well, I liken the state budget to those of us that
sit around a kitchen table and look at our budgets, whether that's every month or every year, but you sit around the kitchen table and I know at my house if there's no money in the budget, then you have to start making cuts and you make appropriate adjustments, I guess is what I'd like to say, to make sure that you're balancing as a family and things. What the state has done is we continue to charge on our Visa card. We pull out our MasterCard to pay off our Visa card, and then we have our American Express over here that we're still charging wildly on. That doesn't work. It doesn't work in your household budget, and it doesn't work in the state budget. We have to get back and look at everything has to be on the table, and we have to look at revenue reform, and we have to go back to basics and go back to the way we used to do things and looking at it step by step by step and making an analytical decision as we go. We absolutely need that rainy day fund. I know I signed on with that rainy day fund as part to make that part of the to give the voters a choice to approve that or not. Years ago, we have tried this 2 or 3 times since I've been in the Senate, and we've never been successful at getting that to you. That rainy day fund wouldn't have saved us from our self-inflicted wounds right now, but it would have certainly helped a little bit, and it is a cyclical process, and so we absolutely need that rainy day fund. Most families, their goal is to have a savings account for those days that you need it, and the state just has none.
All right, and last question. How would you address the dramatic increases in costs for post-secondary and higher education in Kansas?
Before I answer that question, Patrick, if I may take the liberty of introducing John Williams, who came in late, a member of the school board, and also a constituent. I'm no dummy. He's not only a constituent, he's my boss. You know, it's a sad commentary now that all 6 Regents institutions receive less in state aid than they do tuition aid. And I think it was maybe a couple of years ago that the last surviving institution that was getting more state aid, I think was maybe Fort Hays State. I don't recall that for certain, but all 6 now are behind in state aid what the legislature appropriates, and we're depending on college students more and more to pay the tuition. And we are pricing people out basically of a regent's education. Hopefully the community colleges, through their tax base, local tax base, can continue to keep their tuition and fees down, so we at least give high school graduates that opportunity to attend a community college or a technical school. So the idea I heard tonight from the newest of us as the incumbent legislator, Jim Gartner, I thought was an excellent idea that we ought to pursue. The legislature ought to look at the EDIF, the Economic Development Initiatives Fund. That's the lottery money that comes in, millions of dollars that come in. And quite frankly, I don't know if the legislature has done a very good job of getting a handle in terms of what the results are, what we're actually getting for those dollars. Invariably, when I go to a constituent meeting, people will say, well, how come we're not using the lottery money for education? Because that's what it was supposed to be. Well, in reality, the lottery was on the ballot in 1986 here in Kansas, and it was on the ballot across the border in Missouri. And Missouri does spend their lottery money on education. So I think that confused Kansas voters into listening to the radio and TV that somehow the lottery money was going to end up going to education here in Kansas. So I believe he's got an excellent idea for us to revisit the EDIF funds and redirect some of that, hopefully a lot of that money, to higher education, because the higher education has been one of those places where this governor and the legislature has chosen to really take money from, to divert funds from higher education in order to balance the budget. And so that, and I think that Candace Ayers, has also laid on the table something that we ought to look at, and that's whether we are in fact, not approving or getting our fair share of federal grant money. I think that's another area we can start to take a look at.
Well, I am a higher educator, so I deal with this all the time. In fact, I was in a meeting today where we're talking about tuition increases for our students. I teach online for the oldest osteopathic medical college in the country, and I have taught both public and private nonprofit higher ed. So I am really familiar with how higher ed is funded. And most higher ed is funded through three sources. One is through endowments, the other is through state allocations, and then of course the other is through student tuition and fees. In what happened here in Kansas was tragic for higher education in many ways, because when the cuts were made, the percentage that was decided on took into account the entire portfolio funding of the universities and included the research funding. And I'm not sure if it was understood that research funding is not a movable fund. Because most of the dollars for research funding come from external granting agencies like other nonprofit foundations or from the federal government, those funds are earmarked for specific projects. And if those projects are not completed, the university is penalized. So it put the universities here in Kansas in a vicious cycle. They can't touch the money that the legislature was allocating or telling them that they could touch, so they couldn't do that. And it put them in a situation where faculty members, those grants are portable, and faculty members could leave and take the grant with them. So the question is, what should we do? And we absolutely have to increase the piece that the state puts into higher education. We can't continue to price every student out, or the majority of students out, of being able to get a higher education. So I'm very much in favor of looking at the lottery option that's been mentioned. Also, I think that again, if we correct some of the tax issues that we have, that will help ease the burden for higher education. But what is absolutely essential is that when we are, as a legislature, when we are looking at higher education, that we don't confuse all of those different pots of money as one big funding mechanism or funding source for these universities. And I think that was a tragic and really a serious mistake that's been made.
I think clearly the state has not been paying their fair share for higher education. But as I think some have said, even if we reinstitute the taxes, we're not going to see that funding until 2018, the earliest. I think there are a couple of things we can do right away, though. In the past, Kansas has always had what we call a Kansas Comprehensive Grant Program. It's essentially a scholarship program. And it's been open to both kids who go to our Regents universities, but also kids who go to our private colleges in the state of Kansas. The formula had been set at 50-50, even though private school kids account for about 19% of all higher education students in the state of Kansas. To make bad things worse, in the past couple of years, what the legislature did was they took that formula from 50-50 and gave 75% of that money to kids going to our private schools, and leaving only 25% going into our public schools. That reduced the amount of scholarships that our Regents universities could offer students to keep prices down by millions of dollars. I think we need to address that immediately and reinstate either the old formula or, better yet, even a new formula that more clearly represents the balance between private school kids and public school kids. Another thing I think we need to do that probably will take waiting until 2018 when the revenues start coming back in is that we need to ensure that student jobs on campuses are available. You know, that was one of the very first areas to get cut as we started piling on our Regents universities. You just see them come in with, you know, they have 25 teaching assistants here, now they have 3. And all across the board, those kinds of opportunities that allow for work study really went away, and we need to bring that back in. And then I think we need to work with our federal partners so that in the new administration that will come in January, that they look at a way to let our college students refinance whatever debt they do have to incur so that it's reasonable and they can manage. I think it's a great question, but I think maybe the question should be how will you protect the funding that you currently have for higher education? Because I don't believe the cuts to higher education are over yet, sadly. And I think that's going to be a huge discussion. I hope it's a discussion point. I hope it's just not stuck in a bill somewhere. But I think that's a real concern when you look at the numbers for how far behind we are in this fiscal year in the state of Kansas, and where are we going to get that kind of money. And it's been an easy pick, I guess. Well, KDOT's almost out of money. I think there's about $5 million left that is able to be received from us, I guess. But, you know, you start looking at places that have pots of money, and we've turned over all the couches now, and we've shaken them, and you know, we have to have a balanced budget on June 30th. And, you know, that's going to be tough to do. I come from a background of parents that had high school educations. My father-in-law had an 8th grade education. My mother-in-law graduated from high school. My husband and I both graduated from college, and a little more in his case. But, you know, college was affordable. I mean, it was, we talked about this the other day. There was something on the TV or radio or internet or somewhere that said that you used to be able to work in the summer and you used to be able to pay your tuition. It was $235.42. I still have the check. You used to be able to pay your tuition by working through the summers and save up your tuition money. We had grants back then. We had scholarship opportunities. We had a lot of things that helped us get through. And you know, kids today just don't have that. I think it's just a crime to price this generation out of post-secondary education, whether that's in Vo-Tech school or whether that's in higher education through a Regent school, whatever. But we have got to take a look at that, and as has been stated over and over again, the only way you're even going to begin to be able to take a look at that is to look at the revenue and look at reform. Thank you. And thank you for staying through all this.
Great. Thank you. Candidates, thank you so much for your time and for coming out tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming out tonight to listen to the candidates. Please remember to go out and vote on November 8th, and we now turn things back over to TPS School Board President Patrick Woods.
That's right. We're getting you guys out in time to see game 1. So, cheer out of that. Well, I want to, on behalf of the Board of Education, again, thank you all. I want to extend a very hearty thank you for DCAC, our District Citizens Advisory Council, for helping to put this on, along with NEA Topeka. I can tell you as a former DCAC member, I know that's a lot of hard work for little praise and really big, meaty issues that you're dealing with. So I want to thank all of our candidates for coming again, and thank you all for sticking with us tonight. Good beginning to game 1. I'm root for the Cubs. Bring the team. Thank you all very much. A round of applause for our candidates.